nth degree. In other words, he was saying, well, somebody messes with me, then you two wives and our children shall take revenge on them 70 times 7. And then it began to get out of hand. And we know what happened in the first world. In that first 1,000 years or so, that the end of the world came and the flood came, and then we started over with Noah. And so, if Jesus is saying this about 70 times 7, he's turning around the Old Testament thought process for us, which we call ourselves Christians. And then there's another teaching that says that we should offer forgiveness. It's from Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 and 24. It says, "So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go be reconciled to that person, and then come or offer your sacrifice to God." And I think that's just pretty neat, because if this isn't one of those passages where you would like to take a day off from Christianity, it might be. Normally, in the last 3 years, I've been preaching to people who don't go to church very often. And so, by introducing these kind of passages, they're saying, like, you're crazy, man. Are you sure that's in the Bible? We're supposed to forgive? We're just supposed to keep on forgiving? And yes, we are. Yes, we are. Now, there is responsibility with that, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to ask you a question. Who do you want to pay back for hurting you? And I want you to be honest. The great thing about you is I don't know you folks very well. And you don't know me very well. But the great thing is I don't know if I'm stepping on a toe or if you've lived a life of Christianity and you've forgiven. So we're all even. So I'm not pointing to anybody. But at the same time, I'm making statements that simply come from God. And He desires for us to be forgiving. Have you ever wanted anybody to get hit by a bus? Or is that too extreme? Or someone to lose to the point where they get hurt? Or any of those kind of emotions? And I see some no's. But I know there are some yeses too. First of all, you want to be hovering over them and hear that whispering in a final agonizing moment when they say, "I was wrong about you." And many people in this society, maybe not here, but they daydream about getting even. There was a time when 69 Camaros, and if you were very, very wealthy in Brown County, you had a 1974 Camaro, which I wasn't one of those guys. But if you broke up with your girlfriend, you knew what was going to happen. It didn't matter if it was a 69 or 74, there would be a key scratch along that car. And then everybody would be talking about it. And the guy would be upset, and the girl was laughing, and it's just the way it was. That sounds a little bit dramatic, but if we were truly honest, whenever we're hurt by somebody else, especially someone we deeply care for, our minds can go to some pretty dark places. Now, when our hatred turns to where it becomes a thought process of how we can get even, it is a slippery slope downward towards revenge and vengeance. And we are consumed with daydreams and visions about how we're going to get even, or secretly clap our hands with glee when they get hurt. We're in the wrong place. And that's for all people, not just Christians. So, what are our choices? What are our choices with conflict with another person? We can either forgive and let go of the offense, or we can spend our days replaying the wrongdoing over and over again in our minds, fantasizing about how we can get even where some of you have done awful things in efforts to make revenge or get even. It's happened in our past. But the question that I have for you, which decision will always backfire? The one that will always backfire is when we give sin its head. And so, Lewis Smits, author of the book Forgive and Forget, has some really great quotes, and I wanted to read you one that will help you to some degree. It says, when you give up vengeance, make sure you're not giving up on justice. The line between the two is faint, it's unsteady, and fine. Vengeance is our own pleasure of seeing someone hurt who is getting it back and then some. Justice, on the other hand, is secured when someone pays a fair penalty and takes no pleasure in the transaction. Vengeance is personal satisfaction, and justice is moral accounting. Human forgiveness does not do away with human justice. God is the justice. And so he says, vengeance is mine. And so that gives us as Christians a great opportunity. I mean, a great opportunity to let go of stuff that does us no good. And then we say, except for this one case, except for this one time in my life, God, I'd like to see that. And that's the wrong attitude. We are to forgive those who have hurt us because God has forgiven me. And I really appreciate that because it gets rid of some really neat things. Some really neat things that I don't want in my life. And I say neat things because neat is like a picket fence. A great picket fence keeps the dogs away, keeps the wild animals away. But these fences that we put up in our mind and in our environment to keep people away are our fences. And God has an open door. So let's read about it. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 and 32, it says, get rid of all bitterness, passion, and anger. No more shouting or insults, no more hatred feelings of any sort. Instead, be kind and tender-hearted to one another and forgive one another as God has forgiven you through Christ. One Sunday morning, many years ago, I saw some kids crying on the way in, and I heard as they were getting out of the car, the dad said, put a smile on your face and be happy, or you get it when you get back. and I thought, boy, they were struggling about something this morning. And that was such a joy for me because it wasn't my family. But I talked to the dad, asked him what happened, and the brother and sister were fighting, and he just said, we're just struggling, and they always want to come to church, and they always leave happy, but man, it's really a struggle sometimes. And then I told them a little bit about forgiveness. When they get back, you need to express that. You need to talk to them and give an example. You see, only when you let go and forgive will you really feel free. There's a story about Melissa. This is a true story, not a real name. But Melissa was born to a mother who was addicted to heroin. And I've met many of these kids. Melissa's life was not easy. She was neglected, abused, homeless, hungry, yet she tried to take care of herself and protect her younger sister who was experiencing the exact same thing. The situation became so horrible that Melissa and her sister were eventually taken away into a foster care. Abuse followed Melissa into her foster home and eventually into her adoptive home and her new family. So wherever she turned, there was abuse. Melissa grew up wondering why all this had happened to her and why it was still continuing. She could never find the answer. She would ask why. And she'd cry. She got to come to Sunday school, and she would ask her Sunday school teacher, and they became very close friends. And eventually, the Sunday school teacher baptized this little girl. But when we fast forward, we find that Melissa is an adult now. And she got married to her high school sweetie and had 3 children. And she thought she was finally doing the right thing with her life when it got turned upside down by her husband, who became a full-blown alcoholic, addict, and abuser. Feeling hate and resentment and nothing but anger, Melissa went to a life support group at the church. A life support group meets outside the church. They meet during the week. And a lot of times these young families or young people will get together and they study the Word of God. And it was through that